My name is C. I'm the exhibitions manager at Blue Sky in Portland, Oregon. Thanks everybody for joining us. I know we have folks who are here in Portland local, but we've got also Kristen who's joining us from the East Coast, Massachusetts, right?
Yep.
And probably some other folks. So thanks for joining us later in the evening. It's really nice of everyone to be here at different time zones. And yeah, feel free to put in where you're from too in the chat and to say hi. The talk's recorded tonight, so if you need to leave early or you want to watch it again or share it with somebody, we will have that available on our YouTube channel in a couple of days. And if you haven't seen our artist talks before, we have all of those most recent ones also on our YouTube channel, not just our Zoom talks, but also our in-person at the gallery talks. And we just had a really great one with Liliana Guzman, who was also showing in at Blue Sky this month as well. So you can check out install shots also on our website, and also our upcoming events, membership questions. Feel free to go to our website for that. But yeah, let's get started. So Kristen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And it's been a real pleasure having your work up on our walls. The show's gorgeous. We had an amazing turnout for our opening night on Thursday 2 weeks ago already. Time is flying by. It's wild. And so many people were commenting just how much they love your work. So it's just been really wonderful to have you. I'm going to start off by reading our land acknowledgement statement to start. So we at Blue Sky humbly acknowledge that our programming is being held on the traditional lands of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia, Wimal, and Willamette rivers. In this online format, you may be participating from other areas, and we invite you to consider your own land acknowledgement that reflects your location. We also acknowledge that the very technology we rely on for these online programs is inequitably distributed and not equally accessible, creating new virtual displacements and exclusions. We call attention to the need for action now and in the future to address these disparities. Here we go. All right, I'm just going to read a quick bio to introduce Kristen. Kristen Joy Emack is a 2022 Guggenheim Fellow, a McDowell Fellow, and a Massachusetts Cultural Arts Fellow. Her work has been shown nationally and internationally in galleries and photo festivals. She has been published in several magazines, including Vogue Italia. She has been a guest speaker at multiple universities, including Harvard and Hofstra, and her work is in multiple private collections here and abroad. Kristen is a self-taught photographer and works as a public school educator who lives and works in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She is represented by Gallery Caiaphas in Boston. And just for folks who aren't able to come to the gallery in person, we have a couple of install shots so you can see what the show looks like here in Portland. I was commenting when Kristen and I were first on just how much I really love the gold frames with the black and white images. And so hopefully folks in the Pacific Northwest can come to the gallery. The show ends the last Saturday of the month. So that's coming up in 2 weeks, I believe. So, but again, you can also check out images on our website and also through Kristen's website. So Kristen, I'm going to stop my share.
Hey.
You can do yours.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Sue. That was a lovely introduction. And I just wanted to thank everybody for being here. If I were in the room with all of you, the way I'd love to run this talk is for all of us to sit in a circle. And I know that there's a few people on here who are not photographers, beloved friends, but I would guess that most of us are storytellers, and we're all in this together. So I'm really anti-podium and much more about sitting in a circle and discussing things together. So if we can just imagine that we're all sitting in a circle, that'd be wonderful. Also, full transparency, I am always a little freaked out with technology, and I'm so glad to see Michael here, because I feel like if I get into trouble, Michael's going to help us out. And I was also just going to say that I wanted to say thank you, C, to you and to Chris Rauschenberg for having me, inviting me into the gallery. It's a place I've wanted to be for many, many years. So it's really exciting to be here. And there were, unknown to everybody else, there were some little mini crises as my work arrived, damaged. And I was really worried about what was going to happen. And C and Chris just, and the team of other people, I'm not sure who they are, just really took care of things and got the work on the wall. And I'll be having a conversation with UPS soon to see how we can remedy that. So thank you again. Welcome everybody for coming. And I think what I'll do is I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about myself, just to set a little context for where I am, where I've come from, and my trajectory in my photography career. And then I'll go into showing some images of cousins, some of them that are on the wall in Blue Sky right now, and some of them that are not, and one that's not anywhere, but I just decided to throw it in the slideshow tonight. And I also decided that it would be fun to share some of my new work, some of the work that I proposed to the Guggenheim, and that I've been working on a little bit, but really haven't shared it any place. So I thought it would be nice to use this time with all of you to test the new work out and just be able to talk about it a little bit. So as C mentioned in my bio, I consider myself a self-taught photographer. I say primarily a self-taught photographer because I did have some training with a professor at UMass Boston named Melissa Shook. Melissa died in 2020, but she was a very prolific photographer and a big influence on me. If you don't know that name, I really recommend that you look up her work. I know for the last 2 years, Melissa since she passed, she's been, her work has been picked up by a second or third gallery, and it's been shown at APAD the last 2 years. So it's possible that some of you have seen it. But if not, I really recommend that you go look her up, because the work that she was doing in the late 1960s and the early 70s is very, very prolific. And she was doing work as a female photographer at a time when women were having a much more difficult time having that world stage. And she was doing work with her daughter before Sally Mann was. And I know that the two of them have exhibited at other times, but I would love for people to really have a better understanding of who Melissa Shook is. Check out her early work, her self-portraits, and her work called Chrissy. So UMass, I went to UMass Boston, and UMass Boston does have an art program, but they do not have a photography program. So even though I had access to a dark room and had access to other peers who were studying photography, they only offered 2 classes, photography 1 and photography 2. And after that, I was able to work my way into creating 2 independent studies, so that I had more time to sort of figure things out. But there was no structure in the UMass Boston. There's no structure to help you figure out how to create an artist statement, for instance, or what a body of work looked like. It was really just a place and a space to do some experimenting and learn some skills and have access to a dark room. So, but I'll take it a few steps back from there, and that is that I had always felt that I had some ability to communicate with a camera, or even though I really didn't have a camera until I was about 18. But I just had a sense that I would be able to frame things in a way with a tool that would be able to communicate something that I wanted to say, intentionally, or something that was maybe more nebulous and harder to describe. And before I got my first camera, and the first person to give me a camera is my best friend, Christine Gooddale, who lives in Portland, who's on the Zoom tonight, although I can't see you, Chrissy, but I know you're here. And she gave me her grandfather's Sears, I don't know what year it was made, but a 35 millimeter film camera from Sears. And that is what I used for years. Is this it seemed like a fabulous camera at the time, but who knows what kind of quality that was. So I'm grateful for that opportunity for somebody to give me a tool to actually be able to start to teach myself how to communicate with it. But what I mean by that, I had a sense that I could communicate with frames, I take that back a couple of steps to when I started to think of the world in terms of still moments that are collected, that once put together inside of a frame say something different than if you looked at it out without a particular intentional frame. And I take it back to I think like the beginning of my visual thinking goes back to really long car drives. Of course, when I was young and I was in the backseat of a car, we didn't necessarily wear our seatbelts, so I could be much more mobile about where I was sitting in a car. There were no devices, no cell phones, etc., all of that sort of thing. So my attention was to the landscape that was outside of these long car drives. I'm thinking of things like leaving from Connecticut, where I grew up, to go to Vermont. This was a typical common trip that my family took. And I have like very strong visual memory of thinking about something like, for instance, the moon. I'm sure I'm not the only one in the on the Zoom tonight to think that when you're looking at the moon, that the moon is following you when you're walking or you're driving in a car. But this is how if not, this is how I interpreted the moon. And so I can remember being in the car, being in the backseat of the car, and seeing the moon. Maybe perhaps it was in the corner of the side window with lots of negative space, or my father would take a turn and all of a sudden the moon would shift to the back window of the car. It was a much larger frame. Maybe there I could see other things like branches entering the frame. And of course, I wasn't thinking at the time that this was a frame, but I was starting to see how things change when you put it inside of a square or a rectangle, and how emotions could also and moods could shift depending on what you were looking at and how you felt about it. I also can think of an example from that time of, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the term deer in the headlights, but in driving into the rural parts of New England, at certain times at night, you would be driving and all of a sudden there would be a deer that was frozen in front of your car's headlights. So I have very distinct memories of my father stopping the car. I would look out the front windshield, and the way I remember is very cinematic, and because I can remember things like the yellow lights flooding out through the darkness upon the deer, all the different brown and roan colors of the deer, the dark sky that was either black or somewhat blue, and like the breath from the deer if it was in the fall, making its own visual presence in front of me. That in of itself was a strong image, but what would also happen is that moments later, my father would cut the lights off of the car to release the deer from being held, captive by the moment, and he put them back on, and a moment later, it was gone. The frame had changed, and I just found that just like an astounding situation where I was seeing one thing, it was marvelous, and then moments later it looked totally different, and my mood and reaction to what it looks like in that frame had changed as well. So but as I mentioned, again, this is how I believe I first started to become a visual thinker. I would just also like to say that I think someone asked me once, like, did you chase photography or did photography chase you? And I really do feel that photography chased me. I would imagine I'm not the only one on the Zoom call to have that feeling. But an example of why I believe this is that I wasn't the only one in the car. My brother was there, my mother, my father, my sister, and they are not talking years later about what it was like to see the deer and the colors and the shapes. They're not having, they were not constructing stories out of those experiences. So I think we are born visual thinkers, and we either find our way to it or it finds its way to us. But as I mentioned, I didn't have my own camera until I was about 18. I think that's when my friend gave it to me, and I used that for a while. I had always wanted to try and use a camera, but I was super self-conscious. And so when I'd be very jealous and very curious of my peers who were in photography classes at my high school, but I just could not get the courage to go into a class. So it took a while. And when I started college, I started and stopped and started and stopped. So I was a little bit older than many of the students, and the university that I went to was a commuter school at the time. So there were people of a lot of different ages. And somehow or another, I got myself into a photography class. And that's where as I mentioned earlier, I learned to use the camera and to be able to utilize the tool in ways that I wanted. And I started to be able to tell stories this way. And then I had my son before I graduated. So there was again, I don't think I'm the only photographer on this call who understands that parenting can really interrupt the flow of your creativity. It's a beautiful pull in a different direction that sometimes makes it difficult to have that time and access to whatever it is you're trying to develop. So again, I was continued to photograph for a very long time, but it took me quite a while to get to the place where I knew that I needed to make a body of work. The first body of work that I started working on was of my daughter. It's called Appaloosa, which is her name, Apple for short. Of course, she's in Cousins, so some of you might be familiar with her face. And as I was making that body of work and being intentional about it, I was also photographing my nieces and my daughter together in various places, on family trips home to where I grew up in Connecticut, on adventures around the city where we all live. They also live in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We live about a mile apart. And but Cousins was not the work that was getting attention. It was really the first body of work. Appaloosa was the work that was getting exhibited, getting some attention, and there was some interest in it. But I kept plugging away at Cousins, but I was not photographing the girls in any kind of with any kind of intention that I was creating something. I was just an aunt and a mother who is also a photographer, who found opportunities to take well-composed, thoughtful images of people that I love. And it was really until I got to one image taken of my daughter and my middle niece, Leah, in the water in a place called Chatfield Hollow in Killingworth, Connecticut. This is a pond in the middle of the woods where I learned to swim, and there was some sort of alchemy, I would call it, about being in a space where I grew up, watching my daughter and my nieces occupy the same space, doing some of the same things, that I think ended up translating into a photograph that I call Touch. That was the first photograph that I noticed was starting to speak in a way about universal themes. And I realized there's something going on here. So I think with that, I will try to segue into the work. So we're going to try this, folks, for me to share my screen. So you might have to talk me through it, or Michael. Okay. Oh, look at that. All right. See, now where do I push the...
Can you click on that? Click on that tab, or not tab, but whatever. Is that a preview?
No.
Can you just click on the Cousins, like, just so you're clicking on that so I can see because right now it shows you on Zoom.
Oh, you can't see the...
No, now it's preview. Okay, so go to view at the top.
Okay, this is what we did before, but I think I'm going to do full screen, and
this should work if you hit that.
But I want to hit single page, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Good
All
call.
right. Thank you for waiting.
And then,
all right.
Go.
Okay, good. I think we're good. All right. So the image right here is called Braids. And I would say that this is my most iconic image of the series. I think what I'll do is just not tell you too much about each image. I'd prefer to let you look and have your own reflection before I possibly interrupt whatever the experiences you're having looking at the images, and then we'll circle back and I can tell you some more specific details about some of the images. Ooh, that's what you told me, see, not to do that with my mouse. Okay, here we go. One thing to know about the Cousins series is that in the beginning, like I had first mentioned, I was taking images while I was with the girls. So I was just around them with my camera. And in the very beginning, there were more, if not fully candid shots, there were more images where the girls were not particularly aware of the lens. They knew I was there with a camera, but they weren't really forward thinking about this image that I was taking and where it might end up or who might look at it. So I think when looking at the images now, reflecting back after 13 years of making them, I can start to see spaces where the girls become more conscious of the possibility that this image that I've just taken of them is going to travel and that it will have a wider circle of viewership. But I also think that there's some more agency within the girls. And I think this is a good example here. The three of the girls are younger at the top. The first image is called Milk Mustache. The image below it is called Name Necklace. And I think there's more of an awareness in this image of where the work could go. And I feel that there's more, of a collaboration, not in the way that people generally talk about collaboration, but there's like a collaboration of energy between us and sort of awareness of what could happen here. Incidentally, Name Necklace was the last picture I took in 2020, about 2 weeks before whatever that horrible date was, March 13th, I think, when the world shut down. The top image is one of the very first images that I took. Again, it's not the image. When I took this image, I didn't know that a body of work was developing. And honestly, I think I'm always going to work that way, to be following an instinct or a feeling or an energy, because I have to follow it. I feel it's calling me. It feels right to follow it. And not because I'm deciding I'm going to do this job and this body of work, and I want to explore this, and I'll end over here. I've really only done one body of work in that manner that I might discuss a little bit later. This is an image also taken on a trip with the girls. This is I have 3 nieces and 1 daughter. So there are actually 4 girls in Cousins, but a lot of the beginning images only have the 3 older girls. And that's just simply because my youngest, Layla, was quite a bit younger than everybody else. So we would often, I'd be taking the top trio out and about, and Layla was getting a chance to stay home with her mom. This image was sort of everybody was anticipating that my oldest niece, Kayla, was going to be heading off to college soon. And I think there was some thought around what happens when you have a group and one member of that group, one strong member, steps out of it or is not as in close proximity. This is my oldest niece, Kayla. This is probably a 2017 image called Sand. Kayla and her youngest sister, Layla. I did take photographs during, when I had access to the girls. It did take a while to have access to them during 2020. And I did take some imagery of them when there was more visible masking.
but I chose only to, I think this is the only one that's in the series and in the upcoming book where you can see a reference to the mask. And I wanted to nod to that time that we've all lived through, but I didn't want it to become too heavy-handed within the series. The top image is Kayla and her sister Leah. Again, Kayla's the oldest, Leah's the middle, and she's the same age as my daughter Apple, who you see the three of them in the bottom imagery. This is an image that was taken after, it was the day of the eclipse, which I believe was 2017. And this is in my backyard, and this is called Piggyback. This is headbands. The top image was taken in 2021. It's really one of my favorite images of the series. And this was springtime of 2021, as a lot of us experienced. It was really some of the first times that we could go out and didn't have to mask. And we were kind of excited to be together again, and also learning to be together again. The bottom image, again, is an earlier, it's another image that I took that I folded into the series later. Because as I said, when I took it, I wasn't thinking about this being a series necessarily. It's called Codman Farm. This is the image that lives nowhere. I think I shared it one time on Instagram, but it's not in the book, and I never exhibited it. So I thought it'd be nice to share it. This is called Cabin. This was taken this fall. This is Nico's room. The girls were in my son's room when he went off to college. This is Mother Mary. And this is the image that I keep referencing. This is the image that I call Touch. And it's the one that it's my anchor to the beginning of the series. So although it doesn't read that way in any particular sequence, as it's not always exhibited first, or it's not first in the book, but to me, in my mind, this is where it started for me. I would love to share too. I do love to share when I talk with people about how my path to photography was not as easy as it is for some people, and that things like lack of access to be able to buy equipment and things like that, or come into play, because I just know that there's so many of us out here who do not have a typical trajectory, and I think the photo world will just be a healthier place. In fact, I'm going to say Michael's name again because I know we were just talking about this, but I just think the photo world will be like a healthier place when we can all talk about the fact that we didn't all start from A to Z, or we didn't all get the best art program, or we didn't all have access to things, or we didn't, or that it's not all wins. I think it would be lovely for folks to get together and just every once in a while, just share the rejections, share the things that you didn't get, share the fellowship that you didn't get. I think it could be really humbling for the large group of us. This is Love. Layla's Crown. So just a little tidbit about this particular image. I took this image in 2019. I think I shared it briefly on Instagram. There was some interest in the image. I tucked it away, and I didn't share it again until late spring of 2020. And I think the image itself, the energy of the image really took on a new life, because the world was really, the world, but also our country was really experiencing such heartache over the death of George Floyd and all of the civil rights needs that, floated very quickly up to the surface. And so it just took on a much stronger significance that when I decided to share it the second time around. And I share that also to say that I love the potential in images to read differently and to read more strongly at different times. And I think it's lovely to think about how you can put something away and revisit it, or that it can just take on new meaning. The top image is called Sword. And one thing I just want to share about this is that my oldest niece, Kayla, will always say that whenever I show this one, that she's also in this image, because she created the costumes that the girls were wearing when they were playing. And she put the hydrangea in their hair. Quality In is the lower image. If you see this image, if you can ever see this image large, there's a tiny detail of like a story within a story. So the shirt that Kayla has on has the braids image, the image of the back of the three girls' heads. During 2020, somebody on Instagram took the braids image and turned it into I guess like a graphic design that said Black is beautiful. And then showed me and was extremely proud of this thing that they had created, and had made, you could order them on t-shirts. And I know I had some folks who were really worried that it was inappropriate for this person to have taken the image without my permission, although she did share it with me afterwards. But I didn't feel too worried about about the work being hijacked too much or where it was going to go. And I just thought it was a beautiful example of like one creative piece influencing another creative person and then like becoming a third thing. So I just loved the creative iterations of this image. And so I also find it like quietly delightful that Kayla has this image on her shirt. So it's an image of the three girls within this newer image. This is called Hug. This to me is a departure image during the series. And what I mean by that is that this was Kayla had graduated from high school. She was getting ready to go to college. She's in college now at the New School in New York City, and she's studying film and photography, which is also just a lovely outcome of this whole series that we've done together. But she was starting to separate from the pack a bit. In some ways that was really sad for her. In some ways it was really exciting for her. At this particular time, we decided that we'd go off and just photograph her alone. So we walked into the woods, and to me, this is sort of represents that there was a chapter that was just beginning to, that we were just beginning to think about closing, and that Kayla was about to branch off into this new chapter on her own. And another little piece I'll tell you about the Cousin series with this image is that I think it was either just before or just after this image was taken, I had some good friends and some acquaintances suggesting that maybe it was time for cousins to come to an end. And I'd been doing it for a long time, over a decade, and I was really starting to think about this. Was this the right thing to do? Is this what should happen? So I decided that I would discuss it with Kayla and told her, well, Kayla, listen, we're sitting in the car eating pizza. And I said, Kayla, listen, some folks are suggesting that maybe now is the time that you're about to go off to college and that maybe we end the series. And she just got very pensive and very quiet. And she said, I just feel like if Cousins stops, then I stop too. And it was the first it was like a revelation for me. Of course, I know that they have always been thinking about their role in this long-term series, but it hadn't occurred to me or hit me so deeply that for Kayla, being photographed through the course of her childhood into now entering college, she had this experience of being of having some autonomy about how she would be seen, especially as the girls got older. As I mentioned, she could have some control over what was happening in the frame, and how she presented herself, and that this experience had been very positive for her. She received feedback. Her images wound up in Italian Vogue, and it had just not occurred to me how. Let me see if I can say this right. Even though I was always very careful and considering their self-esteem and being mindful of what sort of imagery they would want out into the world, I hadn't thought about it quite from the perspective that there was this positive anchor for her to be seen in this work. And so how we ended that conversation was that I assured her that I would always continue to photograph her, and that she could always have this relationship with me, and that seemed to make her feel better. And then it really took another year or so before we decided that we were actually ready to make the change to close this chapter of Cousins. And part of that is that Cousins is now, I'm working with a publisher, and the work will come out as a book, and that feels like a really beautiful place to for a variety of reasons to have this work, but also as a way to just close out this particular chapter. If anybody knows me, they know I have terrible allergies, and for some reason I'm getting very allergic. So please pardon my stuffy nose, but I don't know what it's from. Probably just springtime in Massachusetts. This image is called New Year's. It was taken at the last day of a year ago, this New Year's. That's important to me because Braids was also taken on the last day of 2019. The top image shows the youngest cousin again. Bottom image is called Emerson. It was at a soccer field. Girls were watching a game. This is called Clouds. What I just would like to share about this image is that because I believe that this is relevant because we're discussing girlhood and looking at a series that looks very intimately at girlhood over time. We were going to the beach. Kayla did not bring her bathing suit. When I asked her why she didn't bring her bathing suit, she said she didn't want to hear it from her parents. She felt that she was going to be, there was going to be some parental body shaming about her getting a bathing suit, going to the beach, maybe having to lose some weight, etc. And so she just didn't want to hear it. So she didn't tell them where we were going. And then what developed was that Kayla just decided when she got to the beach and when she was in a more comfortable space with me and her cousin, she just decided to go into the water in her bra. And when this all came out, and this image is in the book, I asked her ahead of time, like, how do you feel if this is being exhibited? And she feels really good, and she feels like it's just a real moment of body positivity. So when I look at that, there is something probably that speaks to everybody about empowerment in this image and reflection. But to me, it's having the background knowledge about what it meant for her to be there at the beach on this day and like just really loving on herself is special to me. It's called Dandelion. This is for Scythia. This is probably my favorite image of the whole series. Gaze. And excuse me. The last image is Walden. This was an image that I took this summer of Apple and Leah. It's a bit of a nod to the image that I've talked with you about as the image that to me is the first image of the series.
because they're in a body of water. It's a different body of water. This one's in Massachusetts. It's Walden Pond, Henry David Thoreau. But to me, this is the final image. It's the second to last image. It'll be the second to last image in the book, but in my mind, it's where we close out. So I'll stop there, and maybe what we can do, is field a couple of questions, and then if we have a little bit of time, I can show just a little sneak of some of the new work.
Yeah, that sounds great, Kristen. Thank you so much for sharing those slides and talking more about your process. That's always, I think, especially what you were talking about, the transparency of artists like to each other about, I think it's great to have when we have these wins, but that the reality of like, it's so often to have those rejections, and that's so normal. And to not like, I think it's easy to get down as an artist myself, when you don't feel like people appreciate what you're doing, but like a lot of times it's not so much about the work being quote, bad versus it just needing to be seen in the right places at the right time and all of that. So I think it's really great to have those conversations more often. I'm totally in agreement. Yeah. So if folks have questions, for Kristen, you can put them in the chat. If you want to Kristen, if you don't mind hearing from people directly, I can also unmute folks. You can raise your hand using the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom. There's the reactions button. You can hit the raise hand so we know if there are questions that will pop up, and I'll call on you. Or if you feel more comfortable putting your question in the chat, I'll read it out loud.
Okay, great.
So we can do it that way. And so yeah, folks, feel free to go ahead if you have questions. And if not, I think I wrote down, well, I was just curious, you mentioned, so this is going to be a book. And with this last image, do you feel like this project is like finished as quote cousins, or do you feel like you will continue making this work throughout as they grow up, as you age, yeah, I was just curious if you see an end to it or if it's just going to continue as an ongoing project.
I definitely feel like there's no way for me to be around the girls without photographing them, to continue. So I know that I just call it the closing out of a chapter, because I think that there'll be something in the future. I think that there will probably be, I think that I think one of the reasons that the work resonates with people who follow it is that they're also following along the lives of girls who are growing up in front of them. So they're not just, the girls aren't just growing up in front of me, but they're growing up in front of people who go to see the work or follow me on Instagram or friends or people with some sort of proximity to the girls. And so I imagine that it would be really lovely for folks to see where they are 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And I don't know what that'll look like, but I certainly am open to still photograph them. I'd also say that at the end of the summer, I was struggling to see them in still images. And it was really odd. It was so odd to photograph them for so many years, and then to have them in front of me and to put up my camera, and I just couldn't see it, or else I was seeing something that I'd already done before, not the compositionally, but some sort of energy or communication that I feel like I've already communicated that, I've already said that through these images. And so I fought it, because I kept thinking, well, I'm a photographer. I know how to photograph these girls. I should just be doing it. But eventually, what was calling me was to take, I kept seeing the girls in A, color, and B, in movement. So eventually I just gave into that instinct. I don't know why I was fighting it to begin with. I guess because I'm not a filmmaker. So I was thinking, well, I can't do this. But imagine what would have happened if I said I wasn't a trained photographer, so I can't do this. So I just decided to yield to that feeling of wanting to capture them in movement, and I just started filming them, and I created one 2-minute short little film of, well, I made two, but there's just really one that resonates with me, at the same place at Walden Pond. And yeah, so it's just like sort of a new way for me to express whatever it is that I'm feeling and trying to communicate with the circularity of the relationship that the girls and I have with photographing and being photographed.
That's excellent. Yeah, and I imagine it will change over if they move away or where they end up going to college,
Yeah.
all of that. Yeah, so the relationship will continue, but it might look differently
Right.
as it grows up. Thanks for answering my question. I see that Richard Dweck, you have your hand up. Go for it, Rich.
Great. I love this, Kristen.
Thank you.
So my question is, can you talk a little bit about your photographic technique, about actually taking the photos? Because
Sure.
they're so beautiful, yet they look candid in a way. So it's like, yeah, so the two are like, they're wonderful together, but then, yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, I'd love to talk about that. The first thing I'd love to be very transparent about is that I have a very significant learning disability. And so it's something that I've worked a lifetime to try to hide or overcompensate for. And I've been learning this lovely lesson from my oldest niece who's dyslexic, and she's very maybe it's her generation, maybe it's her, but she's very forthcoming about being dyslexic, and she'll put that right out there. So I'm trying to do the same thing. And in saying that, what I'm trying to express is that things like I always have a lot of anxiety when I think people are going to ask like, what lens are you using, or what aperture, or what f-stop, or I know that's not quite what you're asking, but
Yeah, that's not,
yeah. So I've just decided to be forthcoming with that information and say that a lot of times I have no idea what aperture I'm using, or etc. And I would just say that my style in general is very intuitive, partly because of that, partly because the technical work is the technical aspect of photographing can be sort of, outside of my wheelhouse to be able to discuss it or even to know about it. So I just approach it all very, very intuitively. So I think my relationship to light and shadow is also intuitive. I have photo friends who are so skilled at being able to read a space and know like where the light's coming from and how it will look and how it will translate. And I admire those skills a lot. But the way that I work is I just have a sense, and I just work with that. I would say that some of the images of the girls are candid. Some are, some of the later images, for instance, this image here on the screen, I would say it's somewhat candid, but not fully candid, because the girls now have had their work exhibited in a lot of different places. So they're aware I'm taking a photograph of them. But in that particular moment, they've probably forgotten about me.
So like, are they standing still, or you just grab this like in the moment? Or you say, girls stand still?
In this particular image, they just paused for a moment, and I was able to get it. But I had been circling around them in the water, saying things like, "Oh my God, don't splash! I've got my camera." So they were like aware of they were aware that I was in the water with them. But when they paused, I was able to capture it. There's very few images that where I've actually asked them to hold still, but there are a few. Maybe not any that I've had in this particular sequence, but every once in a while there'd be a moment where I'd say, "Oh, can you just hold that?" Yeah.
Okay, thank you. These are wonderful, wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks, Richard, for that good question. Yeah, and I also love that, Kristen, you work in more of a intuitive way, because I think as creative people, we're all going to approach it differently. So you're all going to have people that are, really into the gear versus folks that you just kind of feel your way with what you're looking at. And I think that's really lovely. And you can see that you're just observing everything that's happening in the environment in front of you with your daughter and nieces. Does anybody else have any other questions? before we move on and Kristen can share a couple other things. I'll give a little time if folks want to put something in the chat.
I'm just going to say two things about the work too, and give folks a little time to see it doesn't have to be a question either. If people just want to have any kind of comment or have any information about the story of me or the girls or how this came to fruition, I would love to interact with anybody who has anything to say. But two things I would like to say about Cousins as a series, as a body of work that make it unique. First of all, we're looking at a series of work of Black girls growing up over time. I deliberately interchanged the word, the identity Black and girls of color. So sometimes I'll refer to the girls as girls of color. Sometimes I refer to them as Black. And that's not done in isolation. I often check in with the girls to see how they want to be identified. And it changes from time to time. Also, my daughter's biracial, so that identity piece can also change. So I try to be deliberate about using both of those terms interchangeably when I'm discussing the work. But I'm sure it's not news to anybody on the Zoom that that we, as a culture, need more positive representation, more visual positive representation out in the world in all sorts of different media outlets. I think in the fine art world, it's also the same. But I want to preface that by saying that it's not that this work isn't being made, it's that this work isn't being published or has not been published. So I think it's bodies of work that are where children of color are the priority, still remains under embraced. So that's also something that the girls and I, as they grew older, have talked about and discussed often. So the girls definitely know they are invested in their older years in participating in putting positive images out into the world. That's not where the work started. It's not why the work started. It didn't start to have any kind of political perspective. It was the focus was different, but the reality is that the work becomes political because there's such a lack and under embracing of this type of imagery. So there's that piece that makes Cousins unique, but there's also this element of Cousins that it's a fully female body of work. So what I mean by that is that I have, as a female photographer, have been photographing 4 female family members for a very long time. And so I'll use that word circularity again. There's this, the feminine perspective is just present in the imagery, because I'm looking at them, they're looking back at me. There's sort of a nod to like the greater, like the divine feminine or the larger feminine energy going on all the time. But so I think that's just a cool aspect of the work. But the other thing that makes it very unique, because certainly this is not the first body of work that has to do with girls growing up over time. There's notable bodies of work about girls growing up. There's notable bodies of work about girls who start out little, become teenagers. But what the danger with having, not the danger, that's not quite the right word, but what often happens with bodies of work about girlhood is that they fall into a particular trope, whether it's intentional or not intentional, or I'm not sure. I'd love to actually hear what people have to think about that. But that trope is that there's this predictable arc in these types of bodies of work where girls start off very innocent, they're caught in their imagination, they're unencumbered by the outside world. They hit preteen age, they become self-absorbed, distant, and preoccupied with dating. And they typically end with some kind of suggestion that the girls are now entering womanhood, so that they've left some kind of innocence behind. I'm not suggesting that that does not happen in some narratives, but it certainly doesn't happen in all of them. And it's not present in this work. There is no predictable pattern of starting innocent and winding up less innocent at the end as the girls go off. The girls in the series remain centered in themselves, and they remain connected to each other. And that is because that is really their relationship, that it really truly is their relationship to themselves. They are very grounded and they are very connected. In my artist statement, I say that the pull towards one another is gravitational. I think that's often true in familial relationships, but it's remarkable to me how that has stayed. It's been a highlight of the work throughout the whole body.
Thanks, Kristen. That's a really, really great distinction. And I love that about these particular, your set of the cousins. So I don't see any other questions or hands raised. So Kristen, do you want to share some other images, and then we can come back to some questions after that as well?
Sure. I'm just going to give you a tiny little bit of context and just preface it by saying that this is a brand new body of work, and I'm approaching this body of work the way that I approach all things. I'm following my instinct. I'm following the heartache I have over some of the things I'm photographing, and I'm going where I'm pulled. So I will give you a little bit of context, something like an elevator pitch, just so that you have an idea. But I remain always humbled by the work, and know that work becomes what it wants to be, not what you necessarily want it to be or how you steer it. It's if you remain open, it steers you. But the little bit of background is that Cambridge is undergoing gentrification. Gentrification, of course, is not a new story by any means. It's there's beautiful work about gentrifying cities and communities out in the world. In fact, my photographer friend Al Thompson has made a beautiful body of work about that. What I'm trying to look at here is that Cambridge is gentrifying in a very specific way. And what that means is that Cambridge is becoming what's called an innovation city, much like San Francisco. I think it might even be happening in the Northwest too, but I don't know if it's Portland or Seattle. Cambridge, as you know, is the home of MIT and Harvard. So I'm literally where I'm sitting right now. I'm about a mile from Harvard and about a half a mile from MIT. We're sitting in the Harvard and MIT were from decades and decades were the higher education was the driving economy of Cambridge. And that's what's shifting. What's shifting now is that it's science and innovation that is driving the economy. For instance, the COVID vaccine was developed literally a quarter of a mile from my house. The place where that vaccine was developed is a back-to-back with the two oldest housing developments in the country, literally back-to-back. And with these changes, what's happening is not just that the economic landscape of Cambridge is changing, but who is coming in and what the values are. So one of the benefits of living in a city where higher education is the sort of the puts out the founding principles of a city and the culture. Now that is shifting. So folks are coming to Cambridge for different reasons than they used to before. And my other non-photographer job is that I work for the public schools, and I do family engagement. So I'm very connected to the larger community and to my own community. And so what I'm hope to do, and we'll see what the work decides to do, is to create a visual archive of people in the city who will not be able to sustain themselves here. And I'd like to connect this work to some data and research that we already have about how our demographics are changing, how our economic landscape is changing, and who is not able to, who will not be able to stay in the city, and therefore, like foreshadowing what our city will look like 20 years from now. So I'm starting with people that I know. Several of them are people that I care about or love. So what's happening? Oh, there we go. And I'm so sorry, I'm sniffing and sniffing. I'm so stuffed up right now. So I'll just cycle through, but it's the work is also portraits, but I'm also including, I'd rather call them portraits of emotional portraits or emotional landscapes rather than just saying that I'm taking, in other words, the images without people in them still feel like portraits to me. That's what I'm trying to say. Oh, let me go back one. So we stop there. So that's my little sneak peek to all of you of my new work.
Thanks for the sneak, Kristen. It's really great to see what you're currently thinking about and working on. I can't wait to see, when your book comes out of Cousins. I can't wait to get a copy of that. And that's coming out this summer, is that right?
Oh, the book, is that what you were saying? If well, I've got a Kickstarter going. I am working on getting that funded by the first week of May, and it looks like it's going to be funded. But I encourage all of you to check it out if you'd like to support that work or purchase pre-order a book of Cousins. But it should be, the first printing should be the late spring.
Great.
Yeah.
Exciting. Do you have a link for that on your website that people can go to for the fundraiser?
I do not. Wouldn't that be great? That should probably be on there. But you can definitely find it on Instagram. And
just put it in the chat. So folks, you can copy and paste that into your browser to get there if you're interested. So it looks like there's one question. Just looking at time, maybe we'll just take this one last question if that sounds good. And so I'll hand it over to Rashad.
Rashad?
Yeah. And Rashad looks might still be.
I knew he was going to ask me a question.
There we go.
All right. Wow. I mean, I feel like there's pressure since I'm the last one.
Better be good, Rashad. Better be good.
Oh gosh, too much pressure. Kristen, well, you know how I feel about you. Your work is amazing. And I guess I had a question around just like your transition. So you've been working on obviously Cousins for what, 10 years or so. Can you talk a little bit about, I don't know, like your thought process and mindset around like moving on, right? Because I know you talked about how when you talked to Kayla about, being the end of Cousins and her reaction, but like you personally, how did you, did the new idea just come about? Had you been thinking about it for a long time? What's the process of like an artist moving from a body of work that you've been working so hard on for 10 years to something new?
Well, that is a great question. It was really hard to come to the conclusion to end. And I think that I couldn't do it intellectually. I had to wait until I wasn't seeing what I wanted to see with the camera. Like I was not able to communicate what I wanted to communicate visually with the girls because, as I mentioned, I picked the camera up and I was frustrated. It wasn't happening. So I was mulling over the idea of ending it, closing it out, but I was stuck by a couple of things. One of them is that even though I have other bodies of work, Cousins is the work that people know me, that they know it's the work where I'm best known for. And so my identity is wrapped up in Cousins, just like Kayla's identity was wrapped up it took me a while to realize that, oh, mine's wrapped up in this too. And who am I if I don't do cousins? And what if I do other work and it's not that interesting? Or what if I can't take photographs of, oh, I know the other thing I was thinking was like, if I start a new body of work, am I only going to be taking photographs that still that is still too cousin-esque? And of course, there will always be a carryover of style and perspective. And I do see that in the new work. But it just took me a while to work through some of those things. And I think I was even stuck in just being able to like go out and try to photograph. I also was stuck moving on and transitioning because like I just suggested a few moments ago, I felt as though I had to tell people what I was going to do and then go out and do it. And that's also what happened with the Guggenheim. So I was, of course, thrilled to win the Guggenheim. And part of applying for the Guggenheim is that you have to present what you will, what your fellowship year will look like and what you'll be doing. So you're required to come up with a plan and present that plan. And I panicked when it was all said and done. When things calmed down and I realized I'd actually become a fellow, I thought, oh my God, I've told everybody I'm going to do this thing. Do I have to do that now? Or do I have to do it the way I said I was going to do it? So there was like a lot of, there's just like a lot of different thought processes that I had to go through. And it was really finally what helped with the transition was just a willingness in myself to release what was done. And by releasing what was done, I was able to make space for what is coming and what new ways that I need to communicate. And the last little thing I'll say about that is that I have a dear friend who said to me recently, a couple months ago, oh, how does it feel to have cousins be done? Because this is your life's work. And I went into total panic mode because I thought, is cousins my life work? Or I never thought about it that way. And I know that she was absolutely trying to give me a compliment, but it kind of put me into a bit of a tailspin because I had not been thinking about it like that at all. And I think that cousins is going to be part of the part of my life story as part of my life's work. But I have a lot more work to create, a lot more work to do, and a lot more things to say and communicate. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rashad, for that great question. And what a way to end the presentation with Kristen. Thank you, Kristen, for your thoughtfulness tonight and generosity of your time. It's been really wonderful to hear you talk about your work. And again, the show is up at Blue Sky. I believe the last day you can come see it is Saturday, April 29th. So there's still time to come see it. We are open Wednesday through Saturday, noon to 5 every day. So hope to see you, local folks. If not, again, you can check out images on our website and also just keep on following Kristen and seeing what she's up to. But yeah, thanks so much, Kristen. And thanks everybody for attending. Again, we recorded tonight. So check back on our Instagram or website to get the link to our YouTube to share the talk. And everyone have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. And see you next time.
And if anybody wants to reach out to me, if you had questions that you didn't feel comfortable asking, I'm very approachable. Please just reach out, send me a message on Instagram, email me, whatever. I'll be happy to connect.
Wonderful. And I see you have a kitty cat in the background. I just want to say hi to your cat.
Oh yeah, that's one of them. There she is. Starfire.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks again. And we'll see everyone on our next artist talk. So have a great night, everybody, and take care.